In 1991, while investigating the concept of creating a much darker version of Venom, David Michelinie looked at killing off the main alter ego of Venom, Eddie Brock, and having the Venom symbiote transfer from one host to another, eventually setting on a character who would be a total psychopath. Marvel rejected the idea, under the guise that Venom and Eddie Brock had become one of the most popular duos in the history of Marvel Comics, and there would be a severe backlash at the hands of Marvel Comics fans if they were eliminated. David Michelinie went back to the drawing board, and after several revisions came up with one of the most popular supervillains of all time in the Spider-Man universe. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and today we're going to be talking about Carnage.
I just wanna get loose when the beat drops.
So as the story with Carnage unfolds, we learn that what happens is after the defeat of Eddie Brock is left in Alcatraz serving a sentence, and the Venom symbiote is kind of trying to seek out different people, seek out different hosts, and ultimately manages to locate Eddie Brock. It bonds with Eddie Brock in Alcatraz and leaves behind an offspring that merges with Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy. Now, Cletus Cassidy was a complete and total psychopath devoid of virtually any moral code whatsoever. And it's really kind of interesting here because Cletus Cassidy, despite the fact that he is a normal human being, just doesn't view the world the same way that we do. He views the world of order and structure as an illusion and views chaos and murder and mayhem as the true nature of the world. Now, what's really kind of cool here is that he's not entirely wrong. I mean, say, for example, that we read someone like Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was an 18th and 19th century British philosopher who held the viewpoint that society in a state of nature, that is to say, society without an ordered government, would be engaged in a perpetual and permanent war of all against all based on resources, because resources are not infinite, and someone somewhere would be perceived as having more than someone else, and so there would always be some kind of turmoil, and that things like structure and order and governments would rise up not because humanity wants it to be that way, but because it has to be that way to keep humanity from destroying itself. Now, the difference between Carnage and Venom here is that, of course, Carnage is the offspring, the kind of symbiote offspring, so to speak, of Venom. And because of the fact that the offspring gestated in the environment of the planet Earth, it now has a whole new set of powers in addition to the abilities that Venom has and Spider-Man have. Because always keep in mind that because the Venom symbiote first bonded with Spider-Man, anyone who bonds with the Venom symbiote or any offspring that the Venom symbiote is going to have will have the base powers of Spider-Man in addition to whatever powers it develops after that. Now, with Cletus Cassidy, he is kind of the result of a troubled childhood. Cletus Cassidy, of course, I think he killed his grandma when he was at the age of 8. He was put into a foster home. He killed some kids that were picking on him and then burned down the foster home. He's always been kind of mentally unstable and mentally insane. The symbiote, the Carnage symbiote, actually merges with Cletus Cassidy's bloodstream. With the Venom symbiote merging with Eddie Brock and Flash Thompson and other people, it merged on a surface level. That is to say, it simply just kind of encased itself onto their physical body and granted them different abilities, but it wasn't part of their genetic makeup. With Carnage and Cletus Cassidy, it wasn't that way. With Carnage and Cletus Cassidy, because of the fact that the Carnage symbiote is part of his bloodstream, it will forever exist. It cannot be eradicated permanently. The only way to truly destroy it would be to throw someone like Cletus Cassidy into the sun. That'd really be the only way to destroy Cletus Cassidy down to the most finite atomic level of his body, down to the very last red blood cell. And actually, there have been instances where Cletus Cassidy has more or less kind of been stripped of the Carnage symbiote, but he has in turn just kind of cut himself and bled, and the Carnage symbiote reemerges. Now, when I say that the Carnage symbiote is devoid of all morality, I'm saying this relative to Venom. Venom, of course, is a bad guy. I mean, we know that Venom's a bad guy. He's one of the most popular bad guys, but despite this, Eddie Brock still has some measure of morality. He won't arbitrarily kill people for the sole purpose of baiting Spider-Man to come out and to engage him. He'll simply go and try to find Spider-Man. With Carnage, it's not that way. Carnage will just engage in acts of murder just for the sheer fun of it, because to him it's just enjoyable. And one of the more common practices is for him to kill someone and then to write the word Carnage rules on the walls. Because of this, because of Carnage's just reckless disregard for any real semblance of morality or humanity, he was wildly popular among the comic book base, because we had never really seen that in a character in Marvel Comics. We had never really seen someone who was just so devoid of morality that nothing really mattered to them. There was no limit to how extreme of lengths they would go to in order to bait a superhero out into the open. And he actually spawned this great big huge 14-part crossover series involving every single supervillain in the Spider-Man universe. And it ultimately culminated in Spider-Man and Venom coming together to successfully stave off Carnage and to do the best they could to remove the Carnage symbiote from Cletus Cassidy. But as we've said, it couldn't be done at 100%. Now, with regards to the powers that Carnage has, again, he has the base powers of Spider-Man. He has the powers to climb across walls. He has some measure of spider sense, just because of the fact that the symbiote can see in virtually all directions. But he is immune to both Venom's ability to track his location and Spider-Man's spider sense. And so he's a very formidable opponent. In addition to this, he can also kind of shoot these webbing kind of projectiles from any part of his body. He can turn his arms and different parts of his bodies into any part of his body into knives and stabbing weapons. He can plant thoughts, kind of put people under a state of mind control by injecting these tendrils into their brains. He's a really powerful guy, relatively speaking to other characters. And in fact, there was a point in the Marvel Comics when the Carnage symbiote took over Silver Surfer, if you guys could imagine that. But ultimately, there was one demonstration of a superhero having such extreme powers that Carnage stood no chance, and of course that was the Sentry when the Sentry tore him in half. But nonetheless, Carnage is a very formidable opponent. He's a very interesting opponent. He's a very intriguing opponent. Because of the fact that, for the most part, when we look at supervillains in the Marvel Universe, they still exist by some kind of moral code, albeit a moral code that may exist for their own selfish gains. Electro, for example, was a supervillain who was really kind of obsessed with destroying Spider-Man and gaining money. Magneto, of course, was obsessed with the idea of having mutants at the hierarchy of society. These were characters who had some measure of morality and would engage in their own kind of selfish plans, but wouldn't really disregard the lives of other people. This is one of the reasons why Carnage was so extreme. So yeah, he's a pretty formidable guy, and there's a reason why he's ranked number 90 among on IGN's top 100 comic book villains of all time, because he's just so extreme. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.